The small girl extended the crumpled letter with trembling hands, her baby brother strapped to her back. "This is all I have left," she whispered, eyes wide with hope and fear. The CEO's face transformed as he read each word, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks, but no one imagined what would come next. "Where are you watching from today?" Drop your location in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe for more emotional stories that will touch your heart. The morning sun filtered through the cracked blinds of Michael Anderson's corner office. As CEO of Anderson Enterprises, the 55-year-old executive was used to making million-dollar decisions before breakfast. Today was supposed to be like any other: quarterly reports, shareholder meetings, and strategy sessions. He straightened his silk tie, preparing for the board meeting, when his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Mr. Anderson, there's someone here to see you. She's not on the schedule. Send whoever it is away, Patricia." "The board's waiting." "Sir, it's a child, a little girl with a baby. She's insisting she needs to see you personally." Michael's brow furrowed. "A child? Here?" Curiosity overrode his impatience. "Give me 2 minutes." When the office door opened, Michael's carefully constructed world tilted on its axis. Standing in the doorway was a small girl, no older than 6, with tangled blonde hair and eyes too old for her face. Strapped to her back with what looked like tattered bedsheets was an infant, barely visible beneath the improvised carrier. "Are you Mr. Anderson?" Her voice was surprisingly steady. "I am." She stepped forward, extending a crumpled envelope. "Can you read this letter? It's all I have left." Michael took the envelope, noting his name scrawled across the front in handwriting he hadn't seen in years. His heart hammered against his ribs as he carefully opened it. The first line alone made his knees weak. He collapsed into his chair, eyes scanning the page with growing horror. "Michael, if you're reading this, I'm gone. These are your children. Emma is 6. The baby Lucas is 4 months old." The letter slipped from his fingers. Tears he didn't know he was capable of producing streamed down his face. The girl, Emma, watched him with unwavering eyes. "Your mother," he choked out. "Where is she?" "In heaven," Emma replied matter-of-factly. 3 days ago. The landlord said we had to leave. I remembered the envelope Mom kept for emergencies. It had your name and this address." Michael stared at the child, his child, as the baby on her back began to fuss. "She said you're our dad," Emma continued, her small chin lifting. "Are you?" The question hung in the air between them, a live wire threatening to burn down everything Michael had built. 7 years ago, Michael had met Sarah Williams at a charity gala in Boston. She was a kindergarten teacher, with a laugh that made the champagne in his glass vibrate. Their affair had been intense, passionate, and brief. 3 months of stolen weekends before his impending merger negotiations took him abroad. He had promised to call. He never did. Now Sarah was dead, and her children, his children, stood before him like ghosts of promises broken. "Sir?" Patricia's voice interrupted through the intercom. "The board is asking—" Michael slammed his hand on the button. "Cancel everything. Clear my schedule for the day." Emma hadn't moved, her small frame rigid with determination, despite the exhaustion evident in her posture. The baby's fussing grew louder. "He's hungry," Emma explained. "I only had 1 bottle left, and I gave it to him this morning." Michael nodded numbly, trying to process the situation. "How did you get here?" "Bus, then walking." "Your building is very tall." The simplicity of her answer broke something inside him. This child had navigated public transportation alone, carrying an infant, to find a father she'd never met. "Emma," he said carefully, "may I hold Lucas?" She hesitated, protective instinct flashing across her young face. Then, with practiced movements, she unraveled the makeshift carrier and gently extracted her brother. Lucas was smaller than Michael expected, with a dusting of dark hair and Sarah's nose. The infant's face was red from crying, tiny fists waving in distress. Michael awkwardly accepted the baby, terrified of doing something wrong. Lucas squirmed in his arms, face scrunching up to release another wail. "He needs changing too," Emma informed him critically. "I used the last diaper this morning." Michael looked from the crying infant to the exhausted girl and made a decision that would alter the trajectory of his carefully ordered life. "Patricia," he called, pressing the intercom, "I need you to go to the nearest store, buy diapers, formula, baby bottles, and—" He glanced at Emma's worn clothes. Children's clothes, sizes for a 6-year-old girl and a 4-month-old boy. Emma's eyes widened slightly. "Are you going to help us?" she asked, the first trace of childish vulnerability breaking through her composed facade. "Yes," Michael replied, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "You're not going anywhere, Emma. You and Lucas are staying with me." What Michael couldn't possibly know was how those words would set in motion a chain of events that would bring as much pain as promise and reveal secrets darker than he could imagine. 3 hours later, Michael's pristine penthouse apartment was transformed. Baby supplies littered his minimalist coffee table, a hastily purchased portable crib stood in his bedroom, and Emma sat on his Italian leather sofa, devouring her second sandwich while cartoons played on his rarely used television. Lucas, freshly changed and fed, slept peacefully in Michael's arms. The CEO hadn't moved in 40 minutes, afraid any shift would disturb the fragile peace they'd established. His phone had been buzzing incessantly, board members demanding explanations, his executive team in crisis mode over his unexpected absence. He ignored them all. "Your house is very clean," Emma observed, eyes still fixed on the television. "Mom said rich people have others clean for them." Michael winced. "I have a housekeeper who comes 3 times a week." Emma nodded sagely. "We had roaches. Mom tried to kill them, but they always came back." Each casual revelation was a knife to Michael's conscience. While he'd been building his empire, acquiring vacation properties he rarely visited, Sarah had been raising his children in poverty. "Emma," he began carefully, "did your mum ever talk about me?" The girl turned to face him, sandwich forgotten. "She kept your picture, said you were busy being important." No accusation colored her words, just matter-of-fact acceptance. Sometimes she cried looking at it. Michael swallowed hard. "I didn't know about you or Lucas." "Mom said that." Emma's gaze was disconcertingly direct. "She said you didn't know, but you were a good man who would do right by us if something happened to her." "Vaudeau." The faith Sarah had placed in him, despite his abandonment, was perhaps the most damning thing of all. A knock at the door startled Lucas, who whimpered but didn't fully wake. Michael carefully transferred the baby to the portable crib before answering. His lawyer, Jonathan Mills, stood in the hallway, briefcase in hand and concern etched on his face. "Michael, what the hell is going on? The board is in an uproar. You've never missed a—" Jonathan stopped mid-sentence, catching sight of Emma on the couch. "Who is that?" Michael stepped into the hallway, partially closing the door behind him. In rapid, hushed tones, he explained the situation. Jonathan's expression shifted from confusion to alarm. "Michael, you can't just take in 2 children based on a letter and the word of a 6-year-old. There are legal procedures, paternity tests." "They're mine," Michael interrupted. "I know they're mine." "Even so, there's custody to consider, legal guardianship, social services." "I don't care what it takes," Michael hissed. "Make it happen. These children aren't going into the system." Jonathan studied his client's face. "This could affect the Westridge merger, you know. Family scandal, unknown heirs suddenly appearing." Michael's eyes hardened. "The merger isn't more important than my children." As the words left his mouth, he realized he meant them. Somewhere in the past 3 hours, between changing his first diaper and watching Emma's small shoulders relax incrementally with each passing minute of safety, priorities he'd held for decades had shifted. What neither man knew was that someone was already searching for the children, someone who had a vested interest in ensuring they never found lasting security with their father. The next morning, Michael awoke to tiny fingers prodding his shoulder. Emma stood beside his bed, already dressed in one of the outfits Patricia had purchased. "Lucas is crying," she informed him. "He needs breakfast." Michael glanced at the clock. 5:43 a.m. He'd fallen asleep in his clothes after a night of emergency calls, to Jonathan arranging legal paperwork, to his housekeeper explaining the new situation, to a pediatrician recommended by his doctor who agreed to an emergency home visit. "Right," he mumbled, struggling to his feet. "Breakfast." Emma shadowed him to the kitchen, watching critically as he prepared formula. "You're not doing it right," she observed as he struggled with the bottle. "Mom showed me how." With patient determination, Emma guided Michael through the proper preparation technique. Lucas quieted immediately when the correctly made bottle reached his lips. "You're very good at taking care of your brother," Michael said, watching her test the formula temperature on her wrist, exactly as the pediatrician had demonstrated yesterday. "Mom got sick after Lucas was born. She needed help." Emma's matter-of-fact tone broke Michael's heart. This child had been acting as a caretaker when she should have been playing with dolls and making friends. "What about school?" he asked suddenly. "I went when Mum could take me." Emma shrugged. "I missed a lot when she got really sick." Michael made a mental note to add education to his growing list of urgent matters to address. "Emma, today, some people might come to talk to us. They need to make sure you and Lucas are okay staying with me." Emma's face clouded with fear. "Are they going to take us away?" "No," Michael said firmly, though Jonathan had warned that temporary placement with social services was a possibility. "I won't let that happen." The doorbell rang at precisely 9 a.m. Two social workers, a woman named Mrs. Pearson and a younger man introduced as Mr. Delgado, conducted a preliminary assessment of the situation. They interviewed Michael privately, while a court-appointed child advocate entertained Emma. "Mr. Anderson," Mrs. Pearson began, "while we understand your sudden commitment to these children, the fact remains that you have no legal documentation of paternity, no established relationship with them, and no experience as a parent." "I'm willing to take a DNA test immediately," Michael replied, "and I've already begun making arrangements for appropriate childcare and education." Mr. Delgado nodded. "That's commendable, but we're concerned about the children's emotional well-being. Emma has experienced significant trauma. The loss of her mother, the responsibility for her infant brother, and now placement with a stranger." "I'm not a stranger. I'm their father." Michael's voice was steel. "A father they met yesterday," Mrs. Pearson countered. "Our recommendation will likely be temporary placement in foster care, while absolutely not." Michael stood abruptly. "Those children have lost everything. I will not allow them to be traumatized further by placement with strangers when they have a father willing and able to care for them." The conversation grew increasingly tense until it was interrupted by a commotion from the living room. They rushed in to find Emma in the midst of what appeared to be a panic attack, gasping for breath, while the advocate tried helplessly to calm her. Michael knelt beside her. "Emma, what happened?" Between desperate breaths she managed. "She said, we might. Go somewhere else, Lucas and me, separated." Understanding dawned on Michael's face. He gathered the trembling child into his arms. "That won't happen, Emma, I promise you." Over her head, he met the social worker's eyes with a look that dared them to argue. What no one in the room realized was that the threat to the children was far more immediate than bureaucratic separation, and it was closing in faster than any of them could imagine. By the end of the week, Michael's life had undergone a transformation more radical than any corporate restructuring he'd ever managed. His penthouse now contained a fully furnished nursery for Lucas and a princess-themed bedroom for Emma. His executive assistant had become an expert at scheduling pediatrician appointments between board meetings. His housekeeper had been promoted to full-time with a substantial raise, helping care for the children while Michael navigated the legal labyrinth of establishing guardianship. The DNA test confirmed what Michael had never doubted. Emma and Lucas were his biological children. Jonathan had filed emergency custody papers, leveraging Michael's considerable resources and influence to expedite the process. On Friday evening, Michael sat on the floor of his living room, a position he'd never imagined himself in, building a princess castle with Emma while Lucas cooed in a baby swing nearby. "Did you have a castle when you were little?" Emma asked, carefully placing a plastic turret. "No," Michael smiled. "I grew up in an apartment much smaller than this one." Emma considered this. "Were you poor like us?" The question struck him like a physical blow. "Not as poor as you and your mom were," he answered honestly. "But I didn't have much. My mother worked very hard to give me opportunities. Is your mom in heaven too?" "Yes, she is." Emma nodded solemnly. "Maybe she's taking care of my mom." Michael's throat tightened. "I think she would like your mom very much." The moment was interrupted by his phone. Jonathan's name flashed on the screen. "Michael," his lawyer said without preamble, "we have a problem. A man named Robert Keller has filed a counterclaim for custody of the children." Michael moved into his study, closing the door. "Who the hell is Robert Keller?" "He claims to be Sarah Williams' brother. Says he's the children's uncle and has been supporting them financially for years. That's impossible. There was no mention of a brother in Sarah's letter, and the children were practically homeless. Nevertheless, he has documentation showing regular money transfers to Sarah and claims she kept him at a distance due to your influence. He's painting you as a wealthy executive who abandoned his pregnant girlfriend and is now trying to assuage his guilt by claiming children you never wanted." Michael's blood ran cold. "That's absurd. I never even knew about them." "It's his word against yours. And he has a paper trail showing his ongoing support, while you have nothing showing any connection to the children before last week." "What does he want?" Jonathan hesitated. "That's the strange part. He's not seeking full custody, just substantial visitation rights and decision-making authority for the children's welfare." Something about the situation felt wrong to Michael. Look into him, everything, where he lives, works, his connection to Sarah. "I want to know why a supposedly devoted uncle left his niece to drag an infant across town on public transportation after their mother died." After hanging up, Michael returned to the living room with a forced smile, unwilling to disrupt the fragile security Emma was just beginning to feel. He watched her carefully arranging toy furniture in the plastic castle, her movements precise and methodical, a child trying to create order in a world that had given her none. Later that night, after both children were asleep, Michael opened his laptop and began his own research on Robert Keller. His corporate login gave him access to databases beyond what Jonathan could easily reach. What he discovered sent a chill down his spine. Robert Keller had no legitimate connection to Sarah Williams. But he did have connections to Michael's biggest corporate rival, Westridge International, the very company Michael was in merger negotiations with. The question wasn't who Robert Keller was, but why he wanted access to Michael's newly discovered children. The corporate headquarters of Westridge International occupied a gleaming glass tower just 3 blocks from Anderson Enterprises. In the penthouse office, Carter Westridge, CEO and chairman, studied the preliminary report on his desk. "So Anderson really believes they're his kids?" Carter asked, directing his question to the man sitting across from him. Robert Keller, whose real name was David Mercer, nodded. "DNA tests confirm it. He's filed for permanent custody." Carter tapped his fingers against the polished mahogany desk. "And you're sure he knew nothing about them before now?" "Positive." The woman kept it from him completely, probably thought he wouldn't want them. David's smile was cold. Turns out she was wrong about that. Interesting. Carter leaned back in his chair. Very interesting indeed. For months, Carter had been orchestrating what appeared to be a lucrative merger between Westridge and Anderson Enterprises. What Michael Anderson didn't know was that it was actually a carefully disguised hostile takeover. Once the papers were signed, Carter would strip Anderson Enterprises for parts, absorb its most valuable assets, and discard the rest, including its founder and CEO. The only obstacle had been Michael Anderson himself, too shrewd, too careful, too meticulous in his review of every clause and contingency. Carter needed leverage, something to distract the brilliant CEO to make him vulnerable. And now, Providence had delivered exactly that. "Continue with the custody challenge," Carter instructed. "We need Anderson emotionally compromised and distracted. The more legal complications, the better." "What about the children themselves?" David asked. Carter waved dismissively. "They're just collateral. Once the merger is complete, you can drop the custody suit. They'll be Anderson's problem while he looks for a new job." B. What neither man realized was that their conversation was being recorded by Carter's executive assistant, Melissa Chen, who sat at her desk outside his office, her face betraying nothing of her thoughts. As she listened through the intercom, Carter had forgotten to turn off. Meanwhile, across town, Michael was facing a different kind of crisis. Emma had woken screaming from a nightmare, her small body rigid with terror as he tried to comfort her. "She was reaching for me," Emma sobbed, clutching Michael's shirt. "Mum was reaching and I couldn't grab her hand." Michael held her, his own heart breaking at her pain. "It was just a dream, Emma. You're safe now." "She said to watch out for the man with the scar," Emma whispered against his chest. Michael froze. "What man with a scar?" "The one who came to our apartment sometimes. Mom didn't like him. She made me hide in the closet with Lucas when he visited." Michael's mind raced. Could this mysterious visitor have something to do with Robert Keller? "Emma, this is important. Did you ever hear his name?" Emma's forehead wrinkled with concentration. "David, I think. Mom called him David once when she was yelling." Michael reached for his phone, texting Jonathan despite the late hour. "Need everything on a David connected to Sarah Williams. Possibly has a scar. Urgent." As Emma finally drifted back to sleep in his arms, Michael stared out the window at the city lights, understanding dawning that he wasn't just fighting for custody of his children. He might be fighting to protect them from something far more sinister. The following morning, Michael made two significant decisions. First, he hired a private security team for the penthouse and the children. Second, he assigned Patricia to research every connection between Westridge International, Robert Keller, and a man named David with a scar. What he couldn't have anticipated was that his most valuable ally would emerge from an unexpected quarter, or that his own past would return to haunt him in ways that threatened everything he was fighting to protect. Melissa Chen had worked for Carter Westridge for 3 years, quietly enduring his casual sexism and ethical shortcuts while building her resume toward a better position elsewhere. But the conversation she'd overheard crossed a line she couldn't ignore. Using innocent children as pawns in a corporate takeover was beyond unconscionable. The question was, what to do with the information? Going to the authorities would be pointless. Nothing technically illegal had occurred yet. Internal channels were equally useless. Carter had the board wrapped around his finger. That left only one option: warning Michael Anderson directly. Arranging a meeting proved challenging. Anderson was now surrounded by lawyers, assistants, and security. After multiple rejected attempts to schedule an appointment, Melissa took a more direct approach. She followed Anderson's executive assistant, Patricia, into a coffee shop near Anderson Enterprises, deliberately bumping into her in line. "I'm so sorry," Melissa apologized, helping gather the scattered papers. "It's fine," Patricia replied distractedly. "Wait, you work for Michael Anderson, don't you?" Melissa asked, keeping her voice casual. "I need to speak with him about something urgent, something concerning his children." Patricia's expression hardened. "Who are you?" "Someone who knows why Robert Keller is really seeking custody." Melissa slipped her business card into Patricia's hand. "Tell Mr. Anderson I have proof Westridge is behind it all." 3 hours later, Melissa sat across from Michael Anderson in a private room at an anonymous hotel, security personnel positioned outside the door. "I'm recording this conversation," Michael informed her, placing his phone on the table between them. "I'd expect nothing less." Melissa set down her own phone. "I brought a recording as well, of Carter Westridge discussing his plans with the man you know as Robert Keller. His real name is David Mercer." Michael's eyes narrowed at the name. "David. He's Carter's fixer, handles the jobs too dirty for lawyers." Melissa played the recording, watching Michael's expression darken as he listened. "Why are you doing this?" Michael asked when the recording ended. "Westridge is your employer." "Because I draw the line at using children as corporate pawns," Melissa replied simply. "And because Carter plans to dismantle your company after the merger, which means hundreds of layoffs, including mine." Michael studied her carefully. "What do you want in return?" "Protection from retaliation and a position at Anderson Enterprises afterward." "Done," Michael nodded. "Now tell me everything you know about David Mercer." Melissa pushed a file across the table. "Former military, dishonorable discharge, has worked for Carter for about 5 years handling special projects. He has a distinctive scar from his right temple to his jaw." Michael's breath caught. A man with a scar. Emma's words from the night before echoed in his mind. "Did he have any connection to Sarah Williams?" Michael asked urgently. "Not that I know of," Melissa replied, surprised. "Why?" Before Michael could answer, his phone buzzed with a text from Jonathan. "Emergency. Social services at your penthouse now. Keller Mercer filed abuse allegations. Get back immediately." Michael was on his feet instantly. "We need to continue this later," he told Melissa, already moving toward the door. "What's happening?" she asked, gathering her things. "They're going after my children." His voice was ice. "Now." Across town, Emma stood rigid with fear, as a social worker she'd never seen before questioned her about the bruises a concerned party had reported. Lucas wailed in his portable crib, responding to the tension in the room. "There aren't any bruises," Emma insisted, clinging to Michael's housekeeper, Mrs. Diaz, who had refused to allow the social worker to examine the child without Michael or his lawyer present. The standoff continued until Michael burst through the door 20 minutes later, Jonathan at his heels. "What is the meaning of this?" Michael demanded. The social worker straightened. "Mr. Anderson, we received a credible report of physical abuse." "From whom?" Jonathan interrupted. "That information is confidential to protect the reporter." Michael's eyes blazed. It was Robert Keller, wasn't it? A man who has never even met these children. The social worker's slight hesitation confirmed his suspicion. "This is harassment," Jonathan stated firmly. "My client is in the middle of a custody dispute with Mr. Keller, who is attempting to manufacture evidence against him." As the adults argued, no one noticed Emma slipping into the nursery, no one except Melissa, who had accompanied Michael back to the penthouse. She followed quietly, finding the little girl standing protectively beside her brother's crib. "Are you a friend of my dad's?" Emma asked, eyes wary. Melissa smiled gently. "I am. My name's Melissa." "Are they going to take us away?" "No," Melissa replied with certainty. "Your dad is too smart and strong to let that happen." Emma studied her with that unnervingly adult gaze. "The bad man with the scar is trying to get us, isn't he?" Melissa's smile faltered. "What do you know about that man, Emma?" "He used to scare Mom," Emma whispered. "She said he wanted something she wouldn't give him. What was that?" "I don't know, but she hid a box after he came, said it would keep us safe if anything happened to her." Melissa's heart raced. "Do you know where this box is?" Emma nodded solemnly. "I brought it with us. It's under my bed." That small revelation would prove to be the key to everything. The reason for Sarah's death, the true nature of the threat against the children, and a secret that would shake Michael's world to its foundations. The box beneath Emma's bed was old and wooden, secured with a small padlock. Michael stared at it after the social workers had finally left, his mind racing with possibilities. "We need to open it," Melissa urged. "It belongs to Emma," Michael said. "We should ask her permission." Emma had been listening from the doorway. "Mom said to give it to you if something bad happened. She said you'd know what to do." Michael knelt to her level. "Do you know what's inside?" Emma shook her head. "Just papers and a thing that looks like a necklace. Mom never opened it when I was there." "Do you know where the key is?" "There isn't one. Mom said the lock is just for show." Emma stepped forward and pressed a hidden catch on the side of the box. The lid popped open. Inside were several documents: a birth certificate for Emma, another for Lucas, Sarah's death certificate, and beneath them a sealed envelope marked, "For Michael, open alone," in Sarah's handwriting. There was also a USB drive and a silver pendant on a chain. Michael recognized the pendant immediately. He'd given it to Sarah 7 years ago, a custom-designed piece featuring an intricate pattern that looked decorative but actually represented the molecular structure of oxytocin, the bonding hormone. She'd been touched by the scientific romanticism of it. "I need to read this privately," Michael said, taking the envelope. "Emma, would you show Melissa your new books while I do?" Once alone in his study, Michael opened the envelope with trembling hands. "Michael, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and our children are in your care. Yes, our children. Emma and Lucas are yours, though I never told you about them. I made a terrible mistake 7 years ago. Not loving you, that was never a mistake, but what I discovered during our time together. I worked part-time at Cimatech Labs while teaching, just administrative work to make ends meet. During our relationship, I accidentally accessed files I shouldn't have seen, development plans for biological weapons being created secretly for military application, despite Cimatech's public medical research facade. I copied the files, intending to expose the truth, but then discovered you were negotiating to acquire Cimatech for Anderson Enterprises. I didn't know if you were aware of their secret work. I was afraid, confused, and then discovered I was pregnant with Emma. I ran. Cut all contact. Used the pendant you gave me to hide the USB drive with the evidence, always keeping it close. For years, I thought we were safe. Then last year, a man named David Mercer found me, claiming to work for Cimatech's security division. He wanted the files. I refused, said I'd destroyed them. He didn't believe me, but couldn't find them. The pendant was hiding in plain sight. After Lucas was born, Mercer's threats escalated. When I became ill, I knew I needed to ensure the children's safety. The truth is, on the USB, Cimatech is now a subsidiary of Westridge International. If they've found me, they'll come for the children, thinking they might know where the files are. I'm sorry for keeping them from you. I was trying to protect all of us, but now they need their father. I've always loved you." Sarah Michael sat in stunned silence, the letter falling from his hands. Sarah had been running all these years, living in poverty, raising his children alone, all because of a corporate secret she thought might have involved him. The irony was unbearable. Cimatech had been a minor acquisition that had ultimately failed and been sold off to Westridge International 3 years ago. Michael had never known about any weapons development program. He picked up the pendant, finding the hidden catch that revealed the tiny compartment containing the micro USB. His hands shook as he plugged it into his laptop. The files were comprehensive. Research documents, progress reports, even video of laboratory tests. Project Chimera, they called it. A bioweapon designed to target specific genetic markers. It was horrifying in its implications for ethnic-specific biological warfare, and all of it bearing Carter Westridge's digital signature as project overseer. Michael's phone rang. Jonathan. Michael, Keller, or Mercer has escalated. He's claiming to have evidence that Sarah Williams named him as the children's guardian in her will. He's filed for an emergency hearing tomorrow morning. It's all a lie, Michael replied, his voice deadly calm. And I now have proof not only of that, but of something much bigger. Meet me in an hour with our security team. After hanging up, Michael returned to the living room, where Emma was showing Melissa her favorite picture book. Lucas slept peacefully in his swing nearby. The sight of them, his children, innocent and vulnerable, filled Michael with a cold, clear purpose. Carter Westridge and David Mercer hadn't just threatened his company. They had caused Sarah's years of hardship, possibly even her death, and now threatened his children. They would pay. But first, he needed to ensure Emma and Lucas were beyond their reach. "We're taking a trip," he announced. "Tonight." Melissa looked up sharply. "Where?" "Somewhere safe," Michael replied, already typing instructions to his head of security. "Somewhere no one will find us until I'm ready to end this." What Michael didn't know was that David Mercer had anticipated this move and was already positioned to intercept them. The private airstrip outside Boston was shrouded in pre-dawn fog as Michael's security team escorted them toward the waiting jet. Emma, half asleep, clung to Michael's hand while he carried Lucas in his other arm. Melissa followed closely, scanning their surroundings with nervous vigilance. "Everything's ready, sir," Michael's head of security, Frank Desmond, reported. "The house in Montana is secured and stocked. No digital trail." Michael nodded, his attention focused on getting the children safely on board. He'd chosen his most remote property, a ranch in Montana, purchased through a shell corporation years ago as a potential retirement option. No one connected to Westridge would know about it. They were halfway to the plane when the shot rang out. Frank collapsed instantly, blood blooming on his chest. Before anyone could react, 3 armed figures emerged from behind the hangar. "Nobody move!" The center figure stepped forward. David Mercer, the scar on his face livid in the harsh floodlights. "Mr. Anderson, this could have been so much simpler." Emma's scream pierced the night as she recognized the man from her mother's apartment. She buried her face against Michael's leg. "What do you want, Mercer?" Michael demanded, shielding Lucas with his body. "You know exactly what I want. The USB drive Sarah Williams took." Mercer's gun remained steady, pointed at Michael's chest. "Hand it over, and perhaps we can resolve this custody situation amicably." Michael felt the weight of the pendant in his pocket. The actual USB was safely hidden elsewhere after he'd made copies. "Let the children and Ms. Chen board the plane, and we can discuss this." Mercer laughed coldly. "You're not in a position to negotiate." What happened next occurred with such speed that later Michael would struggle to recall the precise sequence. Melissa suddenly lunged forward, seeming to trip and fall toward Mercer. The distraction drew his attention for a crucial second, long enough for the pilot, who had been approaching unnoticed from the side of the hangar, to draw his own weapon and fire. Mercer's shoulder exploded in red as the bullet struck him. His companions returned fire, forcing the pilot back into cover. In the confusion, Michael scooped up Emma and ran for the plane, Melissa right behind him with Lucas now in her arms. Bullets pinged off the metal hull as they scrambled up the stairs. The co-pilot was already in the cockpit, engines roaring to life. "Frank!" Michael gasped as the cabin door sealed behind them. "I've called an ambulance," the pilot replied grimly, ducking inside and heading straight for the controls. "We need to go now." The jet began moving immediately, taxiing with alarming speed. Through the window, Michael could see Mercer's men dragging their wounded leader back toward a black SUV, one of them still firing ineffectually at the departing aircraft. "Sit down and strap in," the pilot called back. "This takeoff isn't going to be by the book." Michael secured Lucas in an improvised infant seat, while Melissa helped Emma with her seatbelt. The little girl was trembling violently, tears streaming silently down her face. "It's okay," Michael told her, his voice far steadier than he felt. "We're safe now." But as the plane lifted off, banking sharply to avoid another approaching vehicle on the tarmac, he knew it wasn't true. They wouldn't be safe until Westridge and his operation were exposed and dismantled. Hours later, as Montana's rugged landscape appeared below them, Michael finally allowed himself to breathe. The children had fallen asleep, exhausted by fear and the night's events. Melissa sat across from him, her composed facade finally showing cracks. "You saved us," Michael said quietly. "That distraction wasn't an accident." Melissa shook her head. 5 years of self-defense classes. Never thought I'd actually use them." "Why are you really helping us, Melissa? The truth this time?" She met his gaze steadily. "Carter Westridge killed my brother. He was a researcher at Similarity, worked on Project Chimera. When he threatened to expose it, he had a lab accident." Her voice broke slightly. "That's why I took the job with Carter, to find proof." Michael absorbed this new information. "So this isn't just about corporate ethics for you?" "No, it's about justice." Melissa's eyes hardened. "And I think Sarah was killed too. Her illness was too sudden, too aggressive." The implication hit Michael like a physical blow. He looked at his sleeping children, motherless because of Carter Westridge's determination to protect his secret weapons program, the same program that was now targeting them. "When we land," Michael said, his voice low and dangerous, "I'm going to make some calls. By this time tomorrow, the FBI, Department of Defense, and every major news outlet in the country will have copies of the Chimera files." "Westridge has powerful connections," Melissa warned. "Government contracts, military ties." "So do I." Michael's expression was implacable. "And unlike Carter, I have nothing to lose. He's already taken everything that matters." What Michael couldn't know was that the Montana property had been compromised, not by Westridge's people, but by someone with an entirely different agenda. Someone who had been watching Sarah for years before her death and who had their own interest in Project Chimera. Someone who was waiting for them when they arrived. The Montana ranch was nestled in a valley surrounded by pine-covered mountains, isolated from the nearest town by 20 miles of private road. As their rented SUV approached after landing at a small airstrip, Michael felt his tension begin to ease. Here, they would have space and time to plan their next move while keeping the children safe. The main house was rustic but luxurious, a sprawling log structure with modern amenities hidden behind its traditional exterior. Security cameras monitored the perimeter, feeding to monitors inside. Michael had called ahead to the caretaker, ensuring the house was prepared for their arrival. Emma pressed her face against the window, eyes wide at the sight of horses grazing in a distant pasture. "Are those yours?" she asked, the morning's trauma temporarily forgotten. "They are now," Michael replied, relieved to see a spark of childish interest breaking through her fear. "Would you like to see them later?" She nodded eagerly, some of the tension leaving her small shoulders. The caretaker, Jim Hanson, was waiting on the porch as they pulled up, a weather-beaten man in his 60s who had managed the property since Michael purchased it. "Everything's ready, Mr. Anderson," he reported as they exited the vehicle. "Stock the supplies you requested. Security systems activated." "Thank you, Jim." Michael shook the man's hand. This is Emma and Lucas, he added, a strange pride in his voice despite the circumstances. My children. Jim's eyebrows rose slightly, but he simply nodded. Pleasure to meet you, young lady, he said to Emma with a gentle tip of his hat. There's fresh cookies in the kitchen if you're hungry after your journey. Nervous. As they settled into the house, Michael established a command center in the study, setting up secure communications with Jonathan and his security team back in Boston. Melissa helped Emma explore the house, keeping the children occupied while Michael worked. The news from Boston was encouraging. The FBI had received the Chimera files and moved with surprising speed, obtaining warrants to search Westridge International and Cimatech facilities. Carter Westridge was reportedly cooperating with authorities, corporate speak for desperately trying to save himself by blaming others. David Mercer had disappeared after receiving medical treatment, evading the agents sent to question him about the airstrip incident. We've got them on the defensive, Jonathan reported over the secure line. But Michael, this goes beyond corporate espionage. The military contracts alone. There are serious national security implications. We focus on protecting the children legally, Michael instructed. I want bulletproof custody arrangements by the time we return. Use whatever resources necessary. After ending the call, Michael joined the others in the kitchen, where Emma was helping Melissa make sandwiches for lunch. Lucas sat in a borrowed high chair, contentedly gumming a teething biscuit. The domesticity of the scene struck Michael with unexpected force. Despite the danger and uncertainty surrounding them, this felt right, being with his children, providing for them, protecting them. He found himself thinking not just about resolving the current crisis, but about the future. School for Emma, a proper home, birthdays and holidays together. Dad? Emma's voice broke into his thoughts. It was the first time she had called him that instead of Mr. Anderson, and the word sent a surge of emotion through him. Can we see the horses now? Of course, he managed, swallowing past the lump in his throat. They were heading toward the door when Jim's voice came through the intercom, tense and urgent. Mr. Anderson, we have a visitor. Says she knows Ms. Williams. Wouldn't give her name. Michael exchanged a quick glance with Melissa. Keep the children inside, he instructed her, moving to the security monitor. On the screen, he could see Jim standing on the porch confronting a woman, mid-30s, auburn hair, dressed in practical hiking gear. Something about her struck Michael as familiar, though he was certain they'd never met. I'll handle this, he told Melissa, retrieving the handgun he'd brought from the safe. Lock the doors behind me. Outside, Michael approached cautiously, keeping the gun hidden but ready. Can I help you? He called to the woman. She turned, studying him with intense green eyes. Michael Anderson, I'm Dr. Elizabeth Connor. I was Sarah Williams's doctor. Michael tensed. Sarah's doctor, how did you find us here? Because I've been watching over Sarah and the children for years, Elizabeth replied calmly, and because I'm the one who helped Sarah hide the Chimera files in the first place. The revelation stunned Michael. Prove it. The molecular structure on Sarah's pendant is oxytocin, not just because of its symbolic meaning, but because Project Chimera specifically targeted oxytocin receptors to increase suggestibility in test subjects. Elizabeth's gaze was unwavering. I helped Sarah escape 7 years ago when she discovered what Cimatech was really doing. I've been her physician ever since, helping her stay off the grid. If you were protecting them, why didn't you take the children when Sarah died? Michael demanded. Elizabeth's composure cracked, grief flashing across her face. I was at a medical conference in Europe. By the time I got back, they were already with you. I've been tracking you ever since, trying to determine if you were involved with Westridge. And your conclusion? That you're as much a victim in this as Sarah was. Elizabeth took a deep breath. But more importantly, I know something about your son that you don't. Something critical to understanding why Westridge is so desperate to get him back. Michael's blood ran cold. What about Lucas? Not out here, Elizabeth said, glancing around. We need to talk privately. What I have to tell you will change everything you thought you knew about Project Chimera and about why Sarah really died. As Michael led the doctor inside, neither of them noticed the faint drone of an approaching helicopter, still miles away but closing fast. A helicopter carrying David Mercer and a team of mercenaries with orders not to leave any witnesses alive. Lucas isn't just your son, Elizabeth said as they gathered in Michael's study. He's the reason Project Chimera exists. Michael stood rigid, protective instinct flaring. What are you talking about? I was the lead geneticist at Similarity before I discovered what they were really doing, Elizabeth explained, her voice low and urgent. Project Chimera wasn't just about creating bioweapons. It was about genetic enhancement, creating humans with extraordinary capabilities. Melissa leaned forward. My brother never mentioned that part. It was compartmentalized. Most researchers only knew their piece. Elizabeth's eyes never left Michael's. Sarah wasn't just a random administrative employee who saw classified files. She was selected because of her genetic profile, specific markers they were looking for. When she began dating you, it was convenient. Your genetic profile was the other half they needed. Michael felt the blood drain from his face. Are you saying our relationship was engineered? No. That was genuine coincidence. But when they realized Sarah was pregnant, they began monitoring her. The pregnancy was natural, but of great interest to them, because of the specific genetic combination Emma carried. Michael glanced toward the living room where Emma was playing, blissfully unaware of the conversation. What about Emma? Emma's genetic markers were promising, but not quite what they wanted. They kept monitoring Sarah, hoping for another pregnancy that might produce the perfect subject. Lucas, Michael whispered, understanding dawning. Elizabeth nodded. Sarah thought her illness after Lucas was born was postpartum complications. It wasn't. They were experimenting on her, introducing compounds to activate certain genes in Lucas through her breast milk. When I discovered what they were doing, I helped her escape again, modified her medical records to show a terminal illness. So she faked her death? Hope flared briefly in Michael's chest. No! Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears. She really did die 3 days before Emma came to find you, but not from natural causes. Mercer found them again. He was supposed to extract Lucas quietly, make it look like Sarah had died from her existing condition. But something went wrong. What makes Lucas so special? Melissa asked, glancing toward the baby, now sleeping peacefully in a portable crib nearby. His genetic structure contains a naturally occurring mutation that Similarity has been trying to artificially engineer for years, a specific combination from both parents that creates enhanced neural plasticity. In simple terms, extraordinary intelligence and adaptability. Elizabeth leaned forward. Lucas has the potential to process information and adapt to situations at a rate far beyond normal human capability. Westridge believes Lucas is the key to the next generation of Chimera, a way to enhance soldiers' cognitive abilities without drugs or external technology. Michael struggled to process this information. His son, his tiny infant son, coveted by a weapons manufacturer as a template for creating super soldiers. How could they possibly know this already? He's only 4 months old. Brain scans, genetic testing while Sarah was still pregnant. Lucas's neural development has already demonstrated patterns unlike anything they've ever seen. Elizabeth's expression was grave. That's why Westridge won't stop coming. Lucas isn't just valuable to them, he's irreplaceable. A sudden commotion outside interrupted the conversation. Jim's voice came urgently through the intercom. Mr. Anderson, helicopter approaching from the east, not responding to communications. Michael was on his feet instantly. How long? 5 minutes, maybe less. It's Mercer, Melissa said, moving toward the windows. Has to be. Michael's mind raced, calculating options. The SUV wouldn't outrun a helicopter. Fighting wasn't feasible against trained mercenaries. That left only one choice. The caves, he said suddenly. Jim mentioned caves on the property. Elizabeth nodded quickly. Good thinking. If we can get there before they land. You know the area? Michael asked, surprised. I grew up in Montana. Those caves likely connect to an entire system under these mountains. Pack essentials, Michael instructed Melissa, already gathering Lucas from the crib. Warm clothes, water, food for the children. Flashlights from the emergency kit in the mudroom. As Melissa rushed to comply, Michael went to Emma, kneeling before her. Emma, we need to play a game. We're going to go explore some caves, like an adventure, but we need to be very quiet and move very quickly. Can you do that? Emma's eyes widened, sensing the tension despite his calm tone. Is the bad man coming? Yes, Michael answered honestly, but I won't let him hurt you or Lucas, I promise. 5 minutes later, they were hurrying through the pine forest behind the house, Michael carrying Lucas in a front carrier, Emma keeping pace remarkably well for her age. Jim and Elizabeth led the way, while Melissa brought up the rear, constantly checking behind them. The rhythmic thump of helicopter blades grew steadily louder. Through gaps in the trees, Michael caught glimpses of a black helicopter circling toward the ranch house. There! Jim pointed ahead to a rocky outcropping, partially hidden by underbrush. Entrance is behind those boulders. They reached the cave entrance, just as the helicopter touched down near the house. Michael helped Emma scramble over the rocks, then followed with Lucas, the others close behind. Inside, the temperature dropped immediately, the air cool and damp. Jim clicked on a powerful flashlight, revealing a surprisingly large cavern stretching deeper into the mountain. How far do these go? Michael asked, voice hushed. Miles, Jim replied. Used to explore them as a kid. Some parts get narrow, but there's another exit that leads to the north side of the property. From outside, they heard the faint sound of men shouting, orders being barked. They'll find our tracks, Elizabeth warned. Then we keep moving, Michael said firmly, adjusting Lucas in the carrier. Lead the way, Jim. None of them saw the small red light blinking on Elizabeth's hiking boot, a tracker that was already transmitting their location to the one person who had anticipated their every move since the beginning. The cave system was more extensive than Michael had imagined, a labyrinth of twisting passages, some so narrow they had to turn sideways to pass through, others opening into cathedral-like chambers where water had carved fantastic formations into the limestone over millennia. Jim led confidently, his knowledge of the caves proving invaluable as they navigated the darkness. Emma, initially frightened, now seemed to find adventure in their escape, whispering excited observations about stalactites and the occasional bat. Lucas remained mercifully quiet, lulled by the rhythm of Michael's movement and the white noise of water dripping somewhere in the distance. How much farther to the other exit? Michael asked, after what felt like hours of walking. Not far now, Jim replied, his voice echoing slightly. There's a chamber ahead with a freshwater spring. We should rest there, drink and refill our bottles. Elizabeth had been unusually quiet during their trek, occasionally checking her watch with growing frequency. Michael noticed, filing the observation away with mounting unease. Something felt wrong. The chamber with the spring was beautiful. Moonlight filtered through a narrow fissure in the ceiling, illuminating crystal-clear water bubbling from the rock wall. Under different circumstances, it would have been magical. 15 minutes, Michael decided, helping Emma sit on a flat rock. Then we keep moving. While Melissa helped Emma drink and eat a granola bar from their hastily packed supplies, Michael took Elizabeth aside. You're expecting someone, he said quietly. Not a question, but a statement. Elizabeth startled, guilt flashing across her face before she composed herself. "What do you mean?" "You've checked your watch 12 times in the past hour. You're either timing something or waiting for something." Michael's voice hardened. "I trusted you with my children's safety. Don't make me regret it." Elizabeth hesitated, conflict evident in her expression. Finally, she sighed. "I'm not working for Westridge, if that's what you're thinking. But yes, I am waiting for someone who can help us more effectively than running through these caves." "Who?" "Sarah had other allies besides me. People who've been fighting Similarity and their bioweapons program for years." Elizabeth met his gaze steadily. "Government people, the kind who don't officially exist." "Intelligence?" "Something like that. When I realized Mercer had found you, I contacted them. They're meeting us at the north exit." Michael studied her face, weighing the plausibility of her explanation against his instincts. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because I needed to be certain you weren't involved with Westridge. Sarah trusted you, but I couldn't, not until I saw how you protected the children." Elizabeth's expression softened. "She was right about you, Michael. Everything she wrote in that letter was true." Before Michael could respond, a distant sound echoed through the cavern, voices and the beam of flashlights sweeping the passage they'd come through. "They've found our trail," Melissa whispered urgently, already gathering Emma. "Move!" Michael ordered, lifting Lucas, who had begun to fuss, sensing the tension. "Jim, the quickest route to the exit. Now!" They hurried deeper into the cave system, no longer concerned with noise as speed became their priority. The voices behind them grew louder, occasionally punctuated by radio static as their pursuers coordinated their efforts. The cave narrowed dramatically, forcing them into single file. Jim led, followed by Melissa with Emma, then Michael with Lucas, and Elizabeth bringing up the rear. "The exit is just beyond this passage," Jim called back. "Quarter mile, maybe less." Michael felt hope surge, until a sudden cry behind him made him turn. Elizabeth had fallen, clutching her ankle. "Go!" she gasped, waving them forward. "I'll slow them down." Michael hesitated, torn between suspicion and genuine concern. "Melissa, take Lucas," he decided, transferring the baby carrier. "Get the children to the exit. I'll help Elizabeth." As Melissa continued with the children, Michael returned to Elizabeth, helping her to her feet. She leaned heavily against him, limping dramatically. "It's twisted badly," she grimaced. "You should have gone with them." "No one gets left behind," Michael replied grimly, supporting her weight as they moved forward at a much slower pace. The sounds of pursuit grew steadily louder behind them. They had nearly reached the end of the narrow passage when Elizabeth suddenly straightened, her limp vanishing, as she pressed something hard against Michael's side. "I'm truly sorry about this," she said, her voice transformed, cold, professional. "But we need Lucas, and you're only making this more difficult." Michael stared at her in shock, the betrayal hitting him like a physical blow. "You're with Westridge." "No, but I am with people who understand the importance of what Lucas represents." The object pressed harder. A small pistol, Michael now realized. Sarah would have understood eventually. "This is bigger than one child. It's about the future of human potential." Rage coursed through Michael, but he forced himself to remain calm, assessing options. They were still in the narrow passage, barely enough room for 2 people side by side. The sounds of Mercer's team were closing in behind them. Ahead, the passage appeared to widen. "Move," Elizabeth ordered, gesturing with the gun, "toward the exit, quietly." Michael complied, mind racing. He had one advantage. Elizabeth didn't know these caves. Jim did. If he could reach the others, warn them somehow. "You said you were Sarah's doctor," Michael said, playing for time as they moved forward. "Was any of that true?" Most of it," Elizabeth replied. "I did help Sarah. I did try to protect her and the children. I just didn't tell you who I was protecting them for." The passage widened suddenly into another chamber, this one smaller than the last. Moonlight streamed through a larger opening above, the north exit, Michael realized. A crude ladder of metal rungs embedded in the rock wall led upward, and there, at the base of the ladder, stood Melissa with the children, and 3 men in tactical gear, weapons drawn. "Elizabeth?" one of the men acknowledged with a nod. "Mercer's team is 2 minutes behind you." "We need to move now," Elizabeth replied, keeping the gun trained on Michael. "Get the baby." As one of the men approached Melissa, Emma suddenly darted forward, placing herself in front of Lucas. "No!" she cried. "You can't take my brother!" "Emma, come here," Elizabeth said, her tone softening artificially. "We're not going to hurt Lucas. We're going to help him." Emma's chin lifted in that stubborn way Michael had come to recognize, Sarah's determination shining through her daughter. "You're lying. You're a bad person like the man with the scar." Elizabeth's expression hardened. "Take the children," she ordered the men. "Both of them. We can't risk the girl talking." Michael saw his opportunity in the momentary shift of Elizabeth's attention. With explosive speed, he drove his elbow backward into her solar plexus, simultaneously twisting to knock the gun from her hand. Elizabeth gasped, doubling over as the gun clattered to the cave floor. The armed men swung their weapons toward Michael, but in the confined space with the children between them, they hesitated to fire. That hesitation was all Jim needed. Appearing suddenly from a side passage Michael hadn't even noticed, the caretaker tackled the nearest operative with surprising strength for a man his age. Chaos erupted in the chamber. Michael lunged for Elizabeth as she scrambled for the gun. Melissa grabbed both children, pulling them toward the ladder. The remaining operatives tried to intervene without firing in the confined space. Then, from the passage they'd just left, new voices echoed, Mercer and his team closing in fast. "Up the ladder!" Michael shouted to Melissa, finally securing Elizabeth by pinning her arms. "Get the children out!" Jim was struggling with one operative, while another aimed a taser at him. Michael had seconds to decide, help Jim or ensure the children's escape. The choice was clear. Shoving Elizabeth hard into the operative with the taser, Michael scrambled toward the ladder, where Melissa was already halfway up, awkwardly managing the baby carrier while Emma climbed just above her. He had just reached the ladder when the first shots rang out, Mercer's team entering the chamber, firing at the unexpected resistance they encountered. Michael climbed desperately, shielding the others with his body as bullets pinged off the rock walls around them. "Keep climbing," he urged as they reached the moonlit opening. "Don't stop!" They emerged onto a rocky hillside, the Montana night crisp and clear around them. Without hesitation, Michael helped Melissa and the children up, then turned back to the cave entrance. Jim was still down there, fighting to buy them time. The decision tore at him, but the children had to come first, always. "This way," Michael directed, guiding them into the shelter of the pine forest. "There's a ranger station 5 miles north. We can get help there." As they disappeared into the trees, the sounds of gunfire below faded, replaced by the night sounds of the forest and Emma's muffled sobs against Melissa's shoulder. What they couldn't know was that the confrontation in the cave was merely the prelude to a much larger conflict, one that would ultimately force Michael to make an impossible choice between his children and the fate of countless others. Dawn broke over the Montana wilderness, pale light filtering through the pines as Michael, Melissa, and the children reached the ranger station. The small outpost was unmanned this early, but a radio inside gave them contact with authorities. Within hours, the mountainside was swarming with FBI agents and local law enforcement. Michael, his voice hoarse from exhaustion, related the events of the night, omitting only the most sensitive details about Lucas's genetic uniqueness. That information, he knew instinctively, would put his son at risk from more than just Westridge. "We found evidence of a firefight in the cave system," the FBI agent in charge reported. "Shell casings, blood spatter, no bodies." "Jim," Michael asked, hope mingling with guilt. The agent shook his head. No sign of him or anyone else. They cleared out completely. Professional job. Michael nodded, unsurprised. Elizabeth's team wouldn't leave evidence behind, nor would Mercer's. The question was, which group had prevailed in the confrontation, and who was now hunting them? Emma sat nearby, wrapped in a blanket provided by the rangers, her small face solemn as she watched the adults talk. Lucas slept in a makeshift bed, seemingly unaffected by their ordeal. Looking at him, so innocent and vulnerable, Michael struggled to reconcile the extraordinary potential Elizabeth had described with the ordinary baby before him. "Mr. Anderson," the agent continued, "we've arranged secure transport back to Boston. The Justice Department wants to debrief you regarding the Chimera files and your allegations against Westridge International." Michael shook his head firmly. "We're not going back to Boston, not yet. Sir, with all due respect, this is now a federal investigation into potential bioweapons development and corporate espionage." "And my children are targets," Michael interrupted. "I appreciate the FBI's involvement, but I don't trust that Westridge's influence hasn't reached into your agency or others. Until I know exactly who's hunting us and why, we're staying off the grid." The agent's expression hardened. "That's not advisable." It wasn't a request. Michael's tone left no room for argument. "I have resources. We'll cooperate fully with your investigation, but remotely, and only through channels I designate." Indeed, after tense negotiation, a compromise was reached. Michael and the children would be escorted to a secure location of the FBI's choosing, a safe house in Seattle where they could be protected while the investigation proceeded. Michael insisted on bringing Melissa, whose testimony about Carter Westridge would be crucial. As they boarded the helicopter provided by the FBI, Michael couldn't shake the feeling they were making a terrible mistake. Elizabeth's betrayal had shaken his faith in everyone outside their small circle. Who else might be working for interests beyond what they claimed? The safe house was a nondescript suburban home in an upscale Seattle neighborhood, surrounded by similar houses that masked its reinforced security features. FBI agents maintained a visible presence outside, while technical specialists swept the interior for surveillance devices every 6 hours. 3 days passed in relative calm. Emma began to relax slightly, exploring the house and yard under watchful eyes. Lucas continued his normal infant routine of eating, sleeping, and growing, nothing in his behavior suggesting the extraordinary potential that made him so valuable. Michael spent hours on secure video calls with Jonathan, who was coordinating the legal and corporate response in Boston. The news was encouraging. The FBI raid on Westridge International had yielded significant evidence supporting the Chimera allegations. Carter Westridge himself had been brought in for questioning multiple times. "They're building a case," Jonathan reported. "The Pentagon is involved now. They're claiming Westridge misappropriated defense funding for unauthorized research." "What about our custody situation?" Michael asked. "Solid. The Robert Keller custody claim has been completely discredited. Once the dust settles, we'll finalize your parental rights without issue." It should have been reassuring. Instead, Michael felt increasingly uneasy. Something about the situation felt too neat, too contained. Westridge was a shrewd businessman with powerful connections. Would he really fall so easily? On the 4th night, as Michael checked on the sleeping children before bed, Melissa joined him in the hallway. "You don't trust this," she observed quietly. Michael shook his head. "It's too simple. Elizabeth is still out there. Mercer too, probably. And we still don't know exactly who Elizabeth works for, only that they want Lucas as much as Westridge does. What are you thinking?" "That we need a contingency plan, one that doesn't involve the FBI or any official channels." Melissa nodded slowly. "I might have an idea." My brother had friends, people who helped whistleblowers disappear when necessary, off the books, completely untraceable. Can you contact them without alerting our hosts? Michael gestured subtly toward the FBI agents visible through the front window. Give me a day, Melissa replied. That night, Michael slept fitfully, waking at the slightest noise. Around 3 a.m., he gave up on sleep entirely and moved to the chair beside Lucas's crib, watching his son's peaceful breathing. In the dim nightlight, Lucas looked so ordinary, so perfect in the simple way of all babies. What secrets did his DNA hold? What potential lay dormant in that developing brain? And most troublingly, what would those who sought him do if they succeeded in taking him? Michael's phone vibrated with a text. Jonathan, messaging at an unusual hour. Urgent development. Carter Westridge found dead in his home. Apparent suicide. Call when secure. Michael stared at the message, blood running cold. Suicide. Carter Westridge. The man was too arrogant, too convinced of his own importance to take that exit. Which meant... A soft click from the front of the house interrupted his thoughts, so subtle that he almost missed it. Then another, the security system being disarmed, section by section. Heart-pounding, Michael lifted Lucas carefully from the crib and moved silently to Emma's room. Gently waking her, he pressed a finger to his lips before she could speak. "Remember our adventure game?" he whispered, barely audible. "We need to play again, right now." Emma nodded, instantly alert. Michael led her to the walk-in closet in the master bedroom, where he'd prepared an emergency exit, a panel removed from the back wall leading to the attached garage. As they slipped through the opening, Michael caught sight of Melissa already in the garage, car keys in hand. She'd heard it too. "FBI agents," Michael mouthed as they reached her. Melissa shook her head grimly. Gone, all of them. Which meant whoever was entering wasn't triggering alarms because they had authorization. The safe house had been compromised, perhaps from the beginning. The garage had a secondary exit, a standard feature in FBI safe houses. As Melissa carefully unlocked it, Michael secured the children in the SUV parked inside. Emma clutched Lucas protectively, her young face determined beyond her years. They were pulling out of the garage when the first shots rang out, not from the house, but from a vehicle that had suddenly appeared at the end of the driveway, blocking their exit. Melissa swore, throwing the SUV into reverse as bullets shattered the windshield. Michael covered the children in the back seat as she executed a perfect J-turn, speeding toward the secondary exit at the rear of the property. "Who are they?" Michael shouted over the engine's roar and Emma's terrified screams. "Not FBI," Melissa replied grimly, crashing through a wooden fence into an alley beyond. "Military gear, no identifiers." Elizabeth's people, Michael realized. The ones who didn't officially exist. As they sped through the sleeping Seattle suburbs, Michael made a decision that would change everything. They couldn't keep running, couldn't keep the children in constant danger. There was only one way to end this permanently. They needed to make Lucas worthless to his pursuers. "We need to expose everything," Michael said as they sped through the pre-dawn streets of Seattle. Not just Project Chimera, but Lucas's genetic profile, the programs targeting him, all of it. Make it so public that taking him would be pointless. Melissa glanced at him sharply. "You want to reveal your son's condition to the world? Make him a scientific curiosity for the rest of his life?" Michael's jaw tightened. "I want him alive and free. If the information is public, he's no longer a unique resource they can exploit in secret." In the back seat, Emma had finally quieted, protectively cradling Lucas, who had remarkably slept through much of the chaos. Michael met his daughter's eyes in the rear-view mirror, seeing understanding beyond her years. "You want to tell everyone about Lucas's special brain," Emma said softly, "so the bad people can't use him." Michael nodded. "Yes, but first we need proof. Medical documentation of Lucas's condition from someone the world will believe. Someone not connected to Westridge or the government. I know someone, Melissa said, taking a sharp turn onto the freeway. Dr. Helen Martinez at Pacific Neurological Institute. She was my brother's thesis advisor, completely trustworthy. If anyone can verify what Elizabeth told us about Lucas, it's her. Dawn was breaking as they reached the Institute, a modern research facility attached to Seattle Memorial Hospital. After a tense phone conversation, Dr. Martinez agreed to meet them privately in her lab before regular hours. Helen Martinez was in her 60s, with silver-streaked hair and piercing intelligence in her dark eyes. She listened without interruption as Michael explained their situation, her expression growing increasingly grave. What you're describing, enhanced neural plasticity with genetic markers for accelerated cognitive development, isn't theoretically impossible, she said finally, but to deliberately engineer such traits through selective breeding. She shook her head. It's ethically reprehensible. Can you verify if Lucas actually has these traits? Michael asked. We need documented proof from a neutral scientific authority. Dr. Martinez studied the sleeping infant thoughtfully. I can run some preliminary tests, non-invasive brain scans, cognitive response assessments. But Michael, are you certain you want this information documented? Once it exists, you can't control who might access it. If everyone knows, no one has exclusive access, Michael replied. It's his only protection. While Dr. Martinez prepared her equipment, Michael pulled Melissa aside. We need insurance, he whispered. If something happens to us, there needs to be a dead man switch, something that releases all the information automatically. Melissa nodded. I'll contact a journalist I trust. We'll set up a secure file transfer scheduled to activate if we don't reset it every 24 hours. Not just one journalist, Michael corrected. Every major news outlet simultaneously, scientific journals, medical ethics boards, everyone. As Melissa worked on establishing their insurance policy, Dr. Martinez conducted her examination of Lucas, who remained surprisingly cooperative throughout the process. Emma watched with solemn curiosity, occasionally asking surprisingly insightful questions about the equipment. She's quite remarkable herself, Dr. Martinez observed during a break. Her cognitive development is advanced for her age, though within normal parameters. Lucas, however. The doctor's voice trailed off as she studied the preliminary scan results. What is it? Michael prompted, anxiety tightening his chest. I've never seen anything like this, Dr. Martinez admitted, pointing to patterns on the screen. His neural connectivity is extraordinary. The development in his prefrontal cortex particularly, it's accelerated beyond any documented case I've studied. She looked up at Michael, her scientific detachment momentarily replaced by genuine wonder. Your son's brain is developing neural pathways at roughly 3 times the normal rate. If this continues, his cognitive abilities could be unprecedented. The confirmation of Elizabeth's claims sent a chill through Michael. His son was indeed unique, which made him infinitely valuable to those who sought to exploit him. How long until you can provide official documentation? Michael asked. I need to run more tests, consult with colleagues. We don't have time for peer review, Michael interrupted urgently. We need preliminary findings, something substantial enough to be credible, as soon as possible. Dr. Martinez hesitated, clearly torn between scientific thoroughness and the obvious desperation of the situation. 6 hours, she finally conceded. I can give you preliminary findings with my professional assessment in 6 hours. It was longer than Michael wanted, but shorter than he'd feared. Thank you. The lab door burst open, cutting him off mid-sentence. A young research assistant stood in the doorway, face pale. Dr. Martinez, there are men in the lobby asking about you. They're armed. Security is trying to delay them, but they're showing government credentials. Michael and Melissa exchanged alarmed glances. How had they been tracked so quickly? Dr. Martinez moved with surprising efficiency for her age. "This way," she directed, leading them through a back door into an adjoining lab. "The service elevator can take you to the parking garage. I'll stall them." "The scans," Michael insisted. "Lucas's results." The doctor quickly transferred files to a portable drive, pressing it into his hand. "It's not complete, but it's enough to show his neural patterns are unique. My preliminary assessment is included." Michael grasped her hand gratefully. "If anything happens to us—" "I understand," she interrupted. "I'll ensure the scientific community knows the truth." As they hurried toward the service elevator, Emma suddenly stopped, turning back. "What about Dr. Martinez?" she asked, concern etched on her young face. "The bad men will hurt her." The simple question hit Michael like a physical blow. In his desperation to protect his children, how many others was he putting at risk? Jim at the ranch, now Dr. Martinez, people whose only crime was helping them. "I'll stay," Melissa decided before Michael could respond. "I'll help her stall them, give you time to get away. My brother's friends, I've already contacted them. They'll meet you at the location I texted you." "Melissa, no, there's no time to argue," she insisted. "One of us has to protect the children, and they're your children. It has to be you." The truth of her words didn't make the decision any easier. With a final grateful nod, Michael ushered Emma into the elevator, Lucas secure in his carrier. "We'll find you," he promised, as the doors closed between them. As the elevator descended, Michael checked the phone Melissa had given him. The address was for a location in the industrial district, a meeting point with people he'd never met, who he'd have to trust with his children's lives. The elevator doors opened on the parking garage, eerily quiet at this early hour. Michael led Emma toward the emergency exit, planning to find transportation on the street beyond. They were halfway there when a voice called out behind them. A voice Michael recognized with a surge of dread. "That's far enough, Mr. Anderson." David Mercer stood 20 feet away, his scarred face twisted in a cold smile. And beside him, her ankle now perfectly healed, was Elizabeth. "Did you really think we wouldn't anticipate your next move?" she asked. Neurological testing was the obvious choice. Michael pushed Emma behind him, shielding her with his body, while securing Lucas with his other arm. "How did you find us?" "You've been tagged since Montana," Mercer replied, tapping his temple. "Subcutaneous tracker, courtesy of Dr. Connor here, during your dramatic rescue in the caves. Very convincing performance, wasn't it?" Michael's mind raced, calculating options, finding none. The exit was still 10 yards away, too far to reach before Mercer could shoot. The elevator required a key they didn't have. They were trapped. "It's over, Michael," Elizabeth said, almost gently. "Give us Lucas. We'll ensure he fulfills his potential, helps humanity advance beyond current limitations. You and Emma can disappear somewhere safe, new identities, comfortable lives. This doesn't have to end badly. And if I refuse," Mercer's hand moved to his weapon, "then it ends differently, still with us taking the boy, but with much less pleasant outcomes for you and your daughter." Time seemed to slow as Michael faced the impossible choice: surrender his son to people who would use him as a research subject, or risk both children's lives in a futile attempt to escape. What Michael couldn't know was that at that exact moment, someone else had entered the parking garage. Someone whose arrival would dramatically shift the balance of power and reveal the final shocking truth about Sarah Williams and the children Michael had only just begun to know. "Lower your weapon, Mercer." The new voice echoed through the parking garage, female, authoritative, and hauntingly familiar. Michael turned slightly, keeping the children behind him, and felt the world tilt on its axis. Sarah Williams stood at the far end of the garage, very much alive, a pistol trained steadily on Mercer. "Mommy!" Emma's scream was pure emotion. Joy, confusion, disbelief, all mingled into one heart-wrenching sound as she tried to run toward the figure. Michael caught her, holding her back despite her struggles. "It's a trick," he whispered hoarsely, his own mind reeling. "It has to be." But the woman stepped closer, her movements, her posture, her eyes, all unmistakably Sarah's. "It's not a trick, Michael. Emma, baby, stay with your father for now." Mercer had frozen momentarily in surprise, but recovered quickly, his gun still aimed at Michael and the children. "Well, this is an unexpected reunion. We all thought you were dead, Sarah. Very convincing death certificate." "Elizabeth's contribution," Sarah replied coolly. "She's been playing both sides for years. Isn't that right, Doctor?" Elizabeth's composure cracked slightly. "You were supposed to be in deep cover, Sarah. Your reappearance compromises everything we've worked for." "What I've worked for is standing right there," Sarah countered, her gaze never leaving Mercer even as she spoke. "My children, my family. Everything else was a means to that end." Michael struggled to process what was happening. Sarah alive? Elizabeth working with her? None of it made sense against the background of the past weeks. "Sarah," he managed, his voice barely steady, "what is this?" "I'm sorry, Michael," she said, genuine regret in her tone. "There was no other way. You were too closely watched after your initial interest in Cimatech. I had to disappear completely. But you sent the children to me when I had no other choice." Sarah's expression tightened. "Elizabeth was supposed to extract them safely from you once the Chimera files went public, discrediting Westridge. Their custody battle was a distraction, make you fight so hard to keep them that you'd never question if you should." Emma had gone still in Michael's arms, her small body rigid with confusion and dawning hurt as she processed her mother's words. "You were going to take us away from Dad?" she asked, her voice small but surprisingly steady. Sarah's expression softened. "Emma, honey, it's complicated. Your father and I had a genuine relationship that you manipulated from the start," Michael finished, anger finally breaking through his shock. "Was any of it real, Sarah? Or was I just a genetic donor for your project?" "Both," Sarah admitted, her gaze briefly meeting his before returning to Mercer. "The relationship was real. So were my reasons for leaving. Project Chimera was real, and so was the threat it posed. I've been fighting it from the inside for 7 years. "As what?" Michael demanded. "A triple agent? Quadruple?" "As a mother," Sarah answered simply. "Everything I've done, every lie, every manipulation, was to protect our children from becoming weapons." Mercer laughed coldly. "How noble. Unfortunately, the program continues with or without your cooperation." He gestured with his gun. "Now everyone's going to slowly move toward the black SUV at the far end. Dr. Connor, relieve Mr. Anderson of the baby." "That's not happening," Sarah replied, her stance shifting subtly. "Elizabeth, if you touch either of my children, I will consider you a hostile actor. I won't warn you again." The tension in the garage was electric, a 4-way standoff with the children caught in the middle. Michael could feel Emma trembling against him, while Lucas had begun to fuss, perhaps sensing the dangerous energy surrounding them. "You're outnumbered, Sarah," Elizabeth said reasonably. "Mercer's team is already upstairs dealing with your friend Melissa. You can't protect them alone." "She's not alone." The new voice came from behind a concrete pillar, male, authoritative. A figure stepped into view, weapon drawn and aimed at Mercer. "Director Harrington," Elizabeth acknowledged, genuine surprise in her voice. "I didn't expect you to take the field personally." The man, in his 60s, with silver hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to command, moved with precision to position himself between Michael's family and the threat. When one of my best deep-cover operatives breaks protocol after 7 years, I tend to take notice, he replied. Stand down, both of you. This operation is terminated by my direct order. Mercer's face contorted with rage. You can't terminate Chimera. The potential is too great. The potential for abuse is greater. Harrington cut him off. The program was sanctioned for defensive research only. Your pivot to using civilians as unwitting test subjects crossed every ethical and legal line. It ends today. Michael's mind raced to keep up. Your intelligence, he said to Sarah, pieces finally falling into place. You infiltrated Cimatech deliberately. Sarah nodded, eyes still trained on Mercer. Defense Intelligence Agency. I was assigned to investigate rumors of illegal bioweapons development. Meeting you was coincidence, but falling in love wasn't. Yet you left. Because I discovered you were negotiating to acquire Cimatech. I couldn't be sure you weren't involved. Sarah's voice caught slightly. Then I learned I was pregnant, and my priorities shifted. Protecting our child became more important than the mission. But you stayed in the field, Michael said, understanding dawning. You kept working the case, even with Emma. I had to. The deeper I dug, the worse it got. When I discovered they were tracking my pregnancy because of our combined genetic markers, I realized they'd never stop hunting Emma. Later, when Lucas was born and showed the traits they'd been trying to engineer. Sarah shook her head. I knew then I had to find a permanent solution. So you sent them to me, Michael concluded. Made it look like you died. Why not come yourself? Why the elaborate charade? Because I needed to finish this, Sarah replied. End the program completely, but I needed the children safe while I did. Throughout this exchange, Mercer had been shifting position incrementally, his focus calculating. Now, with sudden explosive movement, he fired, not at Sarah or Michael, but at Director Harrington. The older man dropped as the bullet struck his shoulder. In the same instant, Sarah fired back, hitting Mercer in the chest. He staggered but didn't fall, returning fire wildly as he sought cover behind a parked car. Run! Sarah shouted to Michael, advancing to protect their escape route. Michael didn't hesitate. Clutching Lucas tightly and pulling Emma by the hand, he sprinted for the exit, the sound of gunfire echoing behind them. They burst through the emergency door into the early morning light, a siren wailing in the distance. Michael ran without direction, simply trying to put distance between his children and danger. Dad! Emma gasped as they turned down an alley. Stop! Mom! The anguish in her voice tore at his heart. But Michael kept moving. We can't go back, Emma. It's too dangerous. But she came back for us. Emma pulled against his grip. We can't leave her. Michael knelt suddenly, bringing himself to Emma's level while cradling Lucas. Listen to me. Your mother is very brave and very strong. She sent you to me to keep you safe. And that's what I'm going to do. She would want us to keep going. Emma's face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. She's alive, Dad. She's really alive. I know, sweetheart. Michael fought back his own emotions, relief, anger, confusion, all warring within him. And if she can, she'll find us again. But right now, we need to be as brave as she is. Can you do that? The little girl straightened, wiping her tears with a determined nod that broke Michael's heart with its courage. They continued through the city, eventually finding a taxi willing to take them to the address Melissa had provided. As they drove away from the hospital, Michael couldn't help looking back, wondering if he'd just left Sarah behind for the second time, or if she'd left them again by her own choice. The safe house arranged by Melissa's contacts was a modest apartment above a bookstore in a quiet neighborhood. Michael recognized it for what it was, a transitional space, somewhere to gather resources before disappearing permanently. The elderly couple who owned the bookstore asked no questions, simply showing them to the apartment and providing basic supplies. Michael wondered what story Melissa had told them, what favors she had called in to secure this refuge. Emma sat by the window, watching the street below with hopeful vigilance. Lucas, overtired from the morning's chaos, had finally fallen into exhausted sleep in a makeshift crib. Michael's mind wouldn't stop replaying the garage confrontation. Sarah alive, working undercover all these years. The revelation should have been joyous, but instead left him hollow with questions. How much of their relationship had been genuine? How much calculated for her mission? And more pressingly, was she alive now after the gunfight they'd fled? His phone, a burner provided at the safe house, chimed with a text from an unknown number. Package secure. Extraction complete. Await contact. Melissa, confirming she'd survived the hospital confrontation. Relief flooded through Michael, one worry temporarily alleviated. "Dad?" Emma called softly from the window. "Someone's coming." Michael moved quickly to her side, peering cautiously through the blinds. A nondescript sedan had parked across the street, a single figure emerging, Director Harrington, his arm in a sling, but otherwise moving with purpose. "Stay here," Michael instructed Emma. "Lock the door behind me. Don't open it unless you hear me say, 'Princess Castle.'" Emma nodded solemnly, accepting the improvised code word without question. Michael met Harrington in the bookstore, the elderly owners discreetly retreating to the back room to give them privacy. "Mr. Anderson." Harrington extended his good hand. "I apologize for the dramatic introduction earlier. Richard Harrington, Defense Intelligence Agency." Michael ignored the offered hand. "Where's Sarah?" Harrington's expression gave nothing away. "Agent Williams is debriefing at a secure facility. She's physically unharmed. And Mercer? In custody, along with Dr. Connor. The operation has been contained." Michael studied the older man's face, looking for deception. "What happens now? To my family? That depends partly on you." Harrington gestured to a pair of armchairs in the bookstore's reading nook. "May we sit? My injury is rather painful standing." Once seated, Harrington continued in a lower voice. "Project Chimera has been officially terminated. All research materials seized, all personnel detained. The threat to your children from that quarter is eliminated." "What about unofficial threats?" Michael pressed. "The kind that don't officially exist." A faint smile crossed Harrington's face. "Perceptive. Yes, there remains considerable interest in your son's genetic profile within certain communities. Scientific, military, intelligence. Many would see his development as a valuable resource." "He's not a resource. He's a child." "I agree completely." Harrington's tone was sincere. "Which is why I'm here to offer a solution that protects both your family and national security interests." Michael's expression hardened. "I'm not surrendering my son for testing or observation. Quite the opposite. I'm offering complete disappearance, new identities, a new location, comprehensive cover stories. Your children grow up normal lives without surveillance or interference." "What's the catch?" "The information never becomes public," Harrington replied. "No exposure of Project Chimera, no revelation about Lucas's unique development. Everything remains classified, buried so deep that even those who might be interested can never confirm it existed." Michael considered this. His original plan had been the opposite, to make the information so public that secrecy became pointless. But if the threat was truly eliminated, what about Sarah? Harrington hesitated. "Agent Williams's situation is complicated. Her deep cover status makes immediate family reunification problematic." "Meaning what, exactly?" "Meaning there are protocols for extracting deep cover operatives, procedures that can't be circumvented without creating security risks." The director's expression softened slightly. "She knew the constraints when she accepted the assignment, Mr. Anderson, even before she knew about the children." Anger flared in Michael. "So she sacrifices everything, her relationship with her children, her life, while I get to disappear with them. That's your solution. It's the best option available that keeps everyone safe, Harrington replied evenly. The alternative is constant threat, constant running. Your children deserve stability, Mr. Anderson. Agent Williams understands that better than anyone. Before Michael could respond, the bookstore door opened, admitting Melissa. She spotted them immediately, her expression a mixture of relief and wariness. "Michael," she greeted, moving to join them. "Director Harrington." The recognition in her voice confirmed she knew exactly who he was. "Ms. Chen," Harrington acknowledged. "Your brother would be proud of your actions these past weeks." The personal reference clearly caught Melissa off guard. "You knew Daniel." "I recruited him," Harrington replied simply. "His death was regrettable, unauthorized, part of what pushed Project Chimera beyond acceptable boundaries." Melissa absorbed this revelation with visible effort. "And now we're discussing resolution options," Harrington explained. "I've offered Mr. Anderson and the children new identities, complete protection." "But not Sarah," Melissa observed shrewdly. "Not immediately, no." Michael looked between them, a new suspicion forming. "You knew," he said to Melissa, "you knew Sarah was alive." She met his gaze unflinchingly. "I suspected. There were inconsistencies in her death certificate that matched patterns used for protecting intelligence assets. But I couldn't be certain until today." The revelation stung, another layer of deception in a situation already built on lies. Yet Michael couldn't fault her loyalty. She had risked everything to protect his children. "I need to talk to Sarah," Michael stated flatly to Harrington. "Before I agree to anything, I need to hear from her directly." Harrington considered this request, then nodded. "I can arrange a secure communication, once briefly. After that, any contact becomes a security risk until her extraction is complete." "How long?" "For her extraction, minimum 6 months, possibly longer." 6 months, half a year with his children believing their mother alive but unreachable. Emma's hopeful vigil at the window flashed through Michael's mind, followed by the inevitable disappointment as days stretched into weeks, weeks into months. Yet the alternative, continuing to run, keeping the children in constant danger, was unthinkable. "Arrange the call," Michael decided. "After I speak with Sarah, I'll give you my answer." And as Harrington left to make the arrangements, Melissa touched Michael's arm gently. "Whatever you decide," she said softly, "I'll help. You're not alone in this." The simple affirmation broke something in Michael's carefully maintained composure. For the first time since Emma had appeared in his office with her brother on her back, he allowed himself a moment of genuine vulnerability, accepting the support of someone who had become, against all odds, a trusted friend. What neither of them realized was that forces beyond Harrington's control were already moving against them, and that the promised 6-month separation would extend far longer than anyone anticipated. The secure video call was arranged for midnight in a different safe house, a precaution Harrington insisted upon. Michael left the children with Melissa, promising Emma he would bring news of her mother when he returned. The new location was a nondescript office building, its upper floors converted for government use. Harrington led Michael to a small conference room containing only a laptop, with a secure connection already established. "You have 10 minutes, the director explained. "The connection is encrypted but not immune to determined tracking. We can't risk longer exposure." Michael nodded, throat tight with anticipation, as Harrington left him alone. Moments later, the screen flickered and Sarah's face appeared. She looked different from his memories, hair shorter, expression more guarded, a new scar visible along her jawline, yet undeniably Sarah, her eyes softening as they met his. "Michael," she greeted, her voice sending a surge of complex emotions through him. "Are the children safe?" "Yes," he replied, focusing on practicalities to maintain his composure. Emma keeps watching for you. Lucas is growing fast. Sarah's carefully maintained expression cracked slightly. Emma saw me in the garage. I never wanted her to find out that way. You never wanted her to find out at all, Michael countered, unable to keep the edge from his voice. You were going to let her believe you were dead, to protect her, to give her a chance at a normal life. Sarah leaned closer to the screen. Michael, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But everything I did was to keep our children safe. By lying to everyone, to me, to them, to your own agency. Sarah shook her head. Harrington knew the basics of my plan, not all the details. I compartmentalized information to protect everyone involved. But he authorized the operation to fake my death when we realized how far Westridge and Mercer were willing to go. And sending the children to me. Was that part of the authorized operation too? No, Sarah admitted. That was my decision alone. When I realized I couldn't guarantee their safety anymore, I needed someone I could trust absolutely. Despite everything, that was you. The simple declaration caught Michael off guard. You disappeared for 7 years, Sarah, raised our children in poverty rather than tell me about them. Because I wasn't sure if you were involved with Simmertech's secret programs, Sarah explained. Corporate acquisition negotiations gave you plausible connection. I couldn't risk it until I was certain. And when did you become certain? When I saw how you protected them, she answered softly. How you dropped everything, your company, your carefully ordered life, the moment you knew they were yours. That's when I knew I'd made the right choice. Michael absorbed this, struggling to reconcile the woman before him with his memories and the new revelations. Harrington's offering us new identities, a fresh start for me and the children. I know it's the best option, but not for you. Sarah's expression tightened. My extraction is complicated. There are loose ends to tie up, testimony to secure for prosecutions. The people behind Project Chimera went beyond Westridge and Simmertech. There are government officials, military contractors, international connections. How long? Michael asked, the real question hanging between them. Honestly, I don't know. Sarah's composure faltered briefly. 6 months minimum, possibly a year. A year. Emma would be 7, Lucas would be walking and talking. How much more would they lose with their mother? And if I refuse Harrington's offer? If we go public with everything instead? Sarah's response was immediate and firm. Then Lucas becomes a target for every intelligence agency, military research division and biotech company in the world. He'd never be safe, Michael. Neither would Emma. The truth of her assessment hung heavy between them. There was no perfect solution, no path that didn't involve sacrifice. What should I tell Emma? Michael asked finally. She saw you alive. She's waiting for you to come back. Pain flashed across Sarah's features. Tell her. She paused, visibly struggling. Tell her I love her more than anything in the world. That I'm working to make sure she and Lucas will be safe forever, not just for now. Tell her I'll come back as soon as I can. She'll wait for you every day. I know. Sarah's eyes glistened. She's so much stronger than she should need to be at her age, like you in that way. The comparison startled Michael. After a moment, he asked the question that had been haunting him since the garage. Was any of it real, Sarah? Between us? All of it, she replied without hesitation. My mission brought me to Simmertech, but meeting you was chance. Falling in love with you was inconvenient for my assignment, but very real. A sad smile touched her lips. Why do you think I kept your picture all these years? Why Emma knew who you were? Before Michael could respond, Harrington's voice came through an intercom. 1 minute remaining. Sarah straightened, professional composure returning. Take Harrington's offer, Michael. New identities, new location. It's the only way to give the children a normal life. And you'll find us when it's over? if that's what you want. Sarah's gaze was steady, offering him an out if he wanted it. You might build a new life by then. Meet someone else. The implication that she was prepared to surrender not just her children temporarily, but her relationship with him permanently, struck Michael deeply. For all her deceptions, Sarah's selflessness in this moment was undeniable. "We'll be waiting," he said firmly, "however long it takes." Relief and something more vulnerable flickered across her face. "The codes to access your new identities will come through Melissa. Trust her completely. She's been part of this longer than you know." "Connection terminating in 10 seconds, Harrington's voice announced. "Michael," Sarah said quickly, urgency in her tone, "there's something else you should know about Lucas, something I didn't put in the letter. His development isn't just accelerated." The screen went black, cutting her off mid-sentence. Michael stared at the empty display, the unfinished warning echoing in his mind. What else about Lucas had she kept from him? When Harrington entered moments later, Michael had composed himself, decision made. "We'll take your offer," he stated. "New identities, new location, complete disappearance." Harrington nodded, unsurprised. "Arrangements are already in motion. You'll leave tomorrow night. Ms. Chen has agreed to accompany you for the transition period. Her expertise will be valuable. And in exchange, all evidence of Project Chimera, all documentation regarding Lucas's genetic profile. Everything gets classified at the highest level. You never speak of it, never acknowledge it existed." Harrington's expression was grave. "This isn't just about national security, Mr. Anderson. It's about giving your son the chance to be a child, not a subject of study or a weapon of war." As Michael left the building, the weight of the decision settled on him. He was agreeing to surrender his identity, his company, his entire previous life. Yet measured against his children's safety, it wasn't even a choice. What troubled him more was Sarah's unfinished warning. What else about Lucas hadn't she told him? And would 6 months of separation truly be the end of it? Or was Harrington's timeline as carefully managed as everything else in this web of secrets? 3 months later, Michael Sullivan, formerly Michael Anderson, stood on the porch of a comfortable farmhouse in rural Vermont, watching Emma play with their golden retriever in the autumn leaves. Lucas, now 7 months old, babbled happily in a playpen nearby, reaching for colorful toys with increasing coordination. Their new life had taken shape with surprising ease. The farmhouse sat on 30 acres of land, offering privacy without isolation. The nearest town was small but welcoming, the local school excellent. Michael's new identity came with credentials as a financial consultant working remotely, providing both income and explanation for his comfortable lifestyle. Melissa, now Melanie Sullivan, his sister-in-law in their cover story, had stayed as promised, helping them settle into their new routines. Her presence provided continuity for the children and practical support for Michael as he navigated the challenges of full-time parenthood. "Penny for your thoughts," she said, joining him on the porch with mugs of coffee. "Just thinking how quickly they adapt," Michael replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Emma talks about her new school, her new friends. She's learning to ride the pony we got her. Sometimes I wonder if she even remembers." "She remembers," Melissa assured him gently. "She still draws pictures of Sarah, still asks when she's coming home." Michael nodded, the familiar ache resurfacing. 3 months down, 3 to go, at minimum. "Have you heard anything?" "Nothing direct. Harrington sends coded updates through the secure channel. General status reports, nothing specific. Proceeding as planned. No complications." Michael's frustration was evident. "Emma deserves better than that." "We all do," Melissa agreed. "But it's safer this way." Michael wasn't so sure. The lack of information, the extended separation, it felt less like protection and more like manipulation, keeping them dependent on Harrington's organization, isolated from the truth. His concerns had grown when he'd reviewed Lucas's medical records, the real ones, not the sanitized version created for their new identities. Sarah's unfinished warning had prompted him to look deeper, and what he'd found was troubling. Lucas's development was indeed accelerated, but not uniformly. His cognitive functions were advancing at remarkable rates, while certain physical milestones lagged slightly behind typical development. More concerning were the notations about potential immune system irregularities, subtle abnormalities that might indicate future complications. Had Simitech's monitoring of Sarah's pregnancy included intervention? Had they somehow altered Lucas's development without Sarah's knowledge? A chill ran through Michael despite the warm autumn sun. If Lucas's unique genetics came with hidden costs, they needed to know, needed specialized medical knowledge that might not be available to Michael Sullivan, financial consultant in rural Vermont. "We need to consider contingencies," he said abruptly to Melissa. "If Lucas develops health issues beyond what a local doctor can handle." Melissa's expression grew serious. "You found something in his records." It wasn't a question. Michael sometimes forgot how perceptive she was, how little escaped her notice. "Immune system markers that concern me," he confirmed. "Nothing acute, but potential long-term implications if he gets seriously ill." "I've been thinking the same thing," Melissa admitted. "I've made some connections in Boston, doctors who could help off the record if necessary. People who worked with my brother before. Everything." The reassurance eased some of Michael's anxiety, but not all. Every day brought new realizations of just how vulnerable they were in their isolation, dependent on Harrington's organization for protection, yet potentially at risk from the very constraints that protection imposed. That evening, after the children were asleep, Michael sat at his desk reviewing their contingency plans. False identities within false identities. Emergency funds cached in multiple locations, escape routes mapped and memorized, the habits of his corporate security mindset repurposed for his family's protection. A soft knock at his office door interrupted his thoughts. Melissa entered, her expression uncharacteristically hesitant. "We need to talk," she said, closing the door quietly behind her. "I've received a message, not through Harrington's channels." Michael tensed immediately. "From whom?" "Sarah." The name hung in the air between them. Michael's pulse quickened. "How?" "Methods from before," Melissa replied cryptically. "Old networks my brother established. She says Harrington isn't telling us everything. Her extraction has been completed, but they're extending her mission without her consent." "Why?" "Because they've discovered something about Lucas that makes him even more valuable than they initially believed." Melissa's expression was grave. "Sarah thinks they never intended to reunite your family. The separation was meant to be permanent, keep Lucas under observation through you, keep Sarah deployed in the field indefinitely." The confirmation of his growing suspicions hit Michael like a physical blow. "What does she want us to do? She's coming for us, 3 weeks from now." Melissa held his gaze steadily. "But it means going completely dark, no government protection, no official resources, truly on our own. With Emma and Lucas, the risks are substantial," Melissa acknowledged. "But Sarah believes the alternative is worse. She's discovered evidence that Lucas's genetic profile includes intentional modifications, experimental changes made without her knowledge during her pregnancy, changes that require ongoing specialized medical monitoring." Michael felt sick. "They experimented on him before he was even born." "On both children to varying degrees. Emma's modifications were more conservative. Enhanced immune system, improved cognitive processing. Lucas was more extensively altered." The implications staggered Michael. His children hadn't just been born with naturally advantageous genetic combinations. They had been deliberately modified, treated as experimental subjects from conception. If what Sarah's discovered is accurate, Melissa continued carefully, Lucas will need specialized care as he develops. Care that requires knowledge of his true condition. Care that Harrington's organization can provide, but at the cost of his freedom. They'll never let him live a normal life, Michael. He'll always be a subject, never just a child. The choice crystallized with terrible clarity. Trust Harrington and his organization, who had already deceived them repeatedly, to protect and care for Lucas with his best interests at heart. Or risk everything on Sarah's plan, whatever it might be. When exactly does Sarah arrive? Michael asked, decision already made. And what do we need to do to prepare? As Melissa outlined the preparations, Michael gazed at the photos of his children on his desk. Emma's bright smile, Lucas's curious eyes. He had remade his entire life to protect them once. He would do it again if necessary, as many times as it took. What he couldn't know was that Harrington had anticipated this move and had already positioned assets to intercept Sarah long before she reached Vermont. The farmhouse stood dark and silent under the new moon, packed bags hidden in the SUV parked in the barn. Michael moved through the children's rooms one final time, ensuring everything essential was gathered for their midnight departure. Emma slept peacefully, unaware that tonight was their last in the home she'd begun to love. Michael had struggled with how much to tell her, whether to prepare her for another upheaval or shield her from the anxiety of anticipation. In the end, he'd compromised, telling her they might take a special trip soon to see someone important, but not specifying when. Lucas's room was next, the baby sleeping soundly in his crib. Michael paused longer here, watching his son's chest rise and fall with each breath. According to Sarah's information, relayed through Melissa, Lucas's genetic modifications were extensive. Enhanced cognitive processing, accelerated neural development, and modified immune responses that might enable advanced disease resistance, but required careful monitoring as he grew. What kind of life awaited a child with such alterations? Would Lucas ever be able to attend regular schools, make normal friendships, experience an ordinary childhood? Or would his differences inevitably set him apart, mark him as special in ways that isolated him? Michael's phone vibrated with a text from Melissa. Perimeter check clear. 2 hours to extraction. Sarah was close. Closer than Harrington would ever suspect. While her official status showed her still deployed overseas, she had secretly returned weeks ago, establishing a network of safe locations and transportation options for their escape. The plan was audacious. At precisely 2 a.m., they would leave the farmhouse and drive to a private airfield 30 miles away. From there, a chartered plane would take them to Canada, where new identities, created outside official channels through Sarah's connections, awaited them. After that, international travel to a location only Sarah knew, somewhere beyond the reach of U.S. intelligence agencies. Michael returned to his office for a final check of their documents. The children's medical records, financial arrangements, emergency contacts, everything they might need for an indefinite period off the grid. A soft creak from the hallway made him freeze. Footsteps too heavy to be Emma's. Michael reached silently for the gun hidden in his desk drawer. Melissa was outside checking the perimeter. No one else should be in the house. The office door opened slowly to reveal Director Harrington, looking older and wearier than when they'd last met. "Mr. Anderson," he greeted, deliberately using Michael's real name. "Or do you prefer Sullivan now?" Michael kept the gun trained steadily on the older man. "How did you get in?" "Your security is excellent against ordinary intruders," Harrington replied calmly. "But we installed certain access points when the house was prepared for you. Precautionary measures. Where's Melissa?" "Ms. Chen is unharmed. My people are detaining her temporarily. She'll be released once our conversation is concluded." Harrington gestured to the chairs by the fireplace. "May we speak civilly? I'm unarmed, as you can verify." After a cautious pat-down confirmed Harrington's claim, Michael reluctantly lowered his weapon, though he kept it in hand. "Say what you came to say." "Sarah contacted you," Harrington began without preamble. "She's told you we've been misleading you, that Lucas's condition requires specialized care we've concealed from you, that we never intended family reunification. You don't seem surprised. Because we anticipated it, Sarah's emotional connection to the children is her blind spot, one that makes her vulnerable to manipulation." Harrington sighed heavily. "The information she's received about Lucas's condition is true, but incomplete. What she doesn't know is the source of that information." Michael's eyes narrowed. Meaning there's a third player in this game, Mr. Anderson, one that's been moving pieces on the board since before your children were born." Harrington removed a flash drive from his pocket, placing it on the desk between them. "This contains the complete file on Project Chimera, not the sanitized version we provided initially, but everything, including the identity of its true architects. Why give this to me now? Because in approximately 90 minutes, Sarah will be walking into a trap she believes she designed." Harrington's expression was grave. The extraction plan, the safe houses, the international escape route, all compromised from the start. Cold dread settled in Michael's stomach. By whom? By the same organization that initiated the genetic modification program before Similarity or Westridge were ever involved. A private research consortium with tentacles in governments worldwide. They called themselves the Prometheus Group. The name triggered a distant memory. Financial reports Michael had reviewed years ago when considering the Similarity acquisition. Minority investors listed under obscure holding companies, one of which had the word Prometheus buried in its corporate documentation. "Lucas isn't the culmination of their work," Harrington continued. "He's a promising early result. They have dozens of similarly modified children under observation globally, each with different genetic profiles, different potential capabilities. They've been manipulating Sarah since before she met you, positioning her to make exactly the choices she's made." Michael struggled to process this new layer of conspiracy. "Why tell me this? Why not just arrest Sarah, take the children, be done with it? Because direct intervention plays into their hands." Harrington leaned forward intently. "The Prometheus Group thrives on creating chaos, forcing government agencies to take public actions that can be exposed, discredited. They want us to move against Sarah, to take custody of the children. It creates the narrative they need: government overreach, persecution of a mother trying to protect her children. So what's your alternative? Let her come. Let her believe her plan is working." Harrington's gaze was steady. "But instead of following her extraction route, which leads directly to Prometheus operatives waiting to rescue you all, follow ours instead." Harrington slid a second flash drive across the desk. "New identities, new location. Completely outside normal channels, known only to me and 2 trusted agents. Sarah included, if she's willing to listen." "And I'm supposed to trust you?" Michael's laugh was bitter. "After all the deceptions?" "Not trust, verify." Harrington gestured to the first flash drive. "Review the files. Make your decision based on evidence, not emotion. You have 70 minutes. After Harrington departed, through a hidden access panel Michael had never noticed despite months in the house, Michael plugged in the first drive with shaking hands. What he found confirmed his worst fears and revealed dangers beyond what he'd imagined. Project Chimera hadn't begun with Similarity or Westridge. They were merely contractors, implementing a program designed decades earlier. Lucas's genetic modifications were indeed extensive, part of a multi-generational experiment in human enhancement. Most disturbing were the surveillance reports on Sarah, detailed documentation of her manipulation over years, psychological profiles identifying exactly how to leverage her protective instincts and intelligence background. The Prometheus group had been playing a long game, one in which Sarah, Michael, and their children were simply pieces to be positioned and sacrificed as needed. The question now was which path posed the greater danger: Harrington's new offer, or Sarah's extraction plan. Both could be traps, both could lead to disaster. As the minutes ticked away toward Sarah's arrival, Michael made the hardest decision of his life, one that would determine not just his family's safety tonight, but the course of their lives for years to come. 6 months later, a small family walked along a windswept beach on New Zealand's South Island. The man, tall and now bearded, carried a toddler on his shoulders, while a young girl ran ahead, collecting shells in the fading afternoon light. "Emma, don't go too far," the woman called, her once-long hair now cut short, streaks of natural blonde replacing what had once been carefully maintained brown. "I won't, Mom," Emma promised, though she continued her enthusiastic exploration of the shoreline. Michael watched his daughter with a mixture of joy and lingering anxiety that had become his constant companion. 6 months of peace didn't erase 2 years of danger and deception. He still scanned every new location for threats, still maintained escape plans for every place they visited. "You're doing it again," Sarah observed gently, slipping her hand into his. "Force of habit," he admitted. "Hard to turn off." "I know." She squeezed his hand. "I do the same." Their path to this peaceful moment had been anything but direct. The night Harrington had revealed the Prometheus group's manipulation, Michael had made the calculated gamble to tell Sarah everything when she arrived, showing her the evidence rather than immediately following either escape plan. The revelation had devastated her. Years of believing she was protecting her children, making independent choices, only to discover she'd been manipulated at every turn by forces more insidious than she'd imagined. In the end, they'd trusted neither Harrington's new plan nor the extraction route Sarah had arranged. Instead, they'd improvised, using elements of both plans while introducing enough unpredictable variables to shake any surveillance. Melissa had proven invaluable, creating diversions that convinced both the Prometheus group and Harrington's team they were following predictable patterns, while the family slipped away through channels only Melissa knew about, underground networks her brother had established for whistleblowers, and others needing to disappear completely. Lucas squirmed on Michael's shoulders, pointing excitedly at seagulls wheeling overhead. At 10 months old, he was already speaking in simple sentences, his development continuing to outpace normal milestones. Yet, to anyone observing casually, he was just an advanced, happy child, his more significant differences invisible to the untrained eye. They had found a doctor, a geneticist who had once worked with the Prometheus group before ethical concerns led her to defect. Dr. Amelia Chen, no relation to Melissa despite the shared surname, monitored Lucas's development, helping them understand what to expect and how to address potential complications. So far, his health had been excellent, his immune system functioning as designed, protecting him from common childhood illnesses while avoiding the autoimmune complications the Prometheus group's models had predicted. Whether this would continue into adolescence and adulthood remained to be seen, but Dr. Chen was cautiously optimistic. "Dad! Mom! Look what I found!" Emma came running back, clutching something in her hands. At 7, she had blossomed in their new environment, the haunted look that had once shadowed her eyes gradually replaced by childish excitement. She still had moments of anxiety, still occasionally woke from nightmares about the man with the scar, but these episodes had grown increasingly rare. She opened her hands to reveal a perfect spiral shell, iridescent in the fading light. "It's the most beautiful one ever," she declared. It certainly is, Sarah agreed, examining the treasure with appropriate admiration. Should we add it to your collection? Emma nodded enthusiastically, carefully placing the shell in the small bag hanging from her mother's shoulder. The simple interaction, mother and daughter sharing a moment of discovery, still brought a lump to Michael's throat when he witnessed it. After so much separation, so much loss, these ordinary moments felt miraculous. Their small cottage came into view as they rounded the headland. A modest house overlooking the sea, isolated enough for privacy, but close enough to the nearest town for practicality. Michael had established a remote consulting business, using his financial expertise under a new identity. Sarah taught at the local school, finding unexpected fulfillment in shaping young minds outside the high-stakes world of intelligence. Melissa had stayed with them for the first 3 months, helping establish their new lives before moving on to her own fresh start in Australia. She remained their emergency contact, their contingency plan, if trouble ever found them again. As they approached the cottage, Michael noticed a package on their porch, unusual since most deliveries went to their post office box in town. "Stay with the children," he instructed Sarah quietly, old instincts surfacing. She nodded, immediately alert, shepherding Emma toward the side garden while keeping Lucas secure. Michael approached cautiously, examining the package without touching it. Plain brown paper, no markings except their names, their real names, not their aliases. His pulse quickened. After careful inspection revealed no obvious threats, he brought the package inside, using tools from a locked cabinet to open it remotely. Inside was a single USB drive and a handwritten note in unfamiliar handwriting. "The Prometheus Group has been dismantled. Key personnel in custody, files secured. Your family is no longer of interest to any official or unofficial organization. This confirmation comes with no obligations or expectations. Live well." Sarah read the note over his shoulder, her body tense. "Harrington? Seems likely. Do you believe it?" Michael considered the question carefully. "I want to." They examined the USB drive's contents together after the children were asleep, finding comprehensive documentation of the Prometheus Group's dissolution, international police actions, arrests, seized assets. News reports they had missed in their self-imposed isolation, official statements from multiple governments, classified intelligence briefings that could only have come from someone at Harrington's level. "It could be elaborate misdirection," Sarah noted, ever the intelligence professional. "It could," Michael agreed. "But at some point, we have to decide what kind of life we want for them." He gestured toward the children's bedrooms, always running, always suspicious, or believing that sometimes things actually work out. Sarah was silent for a long moment, the question touching the core of their shared journey. "I spent my career never trusting, always looking for the hidden agenda," she said finally. "It kept me alive, but it wasn't really living." She took his hand, her expression softening. "I want them to know how to be careful without being afraid, how to trust without being naive." "A difficult balance," Michael observed, "but not impossible." Sarah smiled, the rare, unreserved expression that had first captivated him years ago. "We've managed harder things." Later that night, they stood together on the porch, watching moonlight play across the water. Lucas slept soundly in his room, monitored by the state-of-the-art system Michael had installed. Emma had finally drifted off after her bedtime story, her shell collection carefully arranged on her windowsill. "Do you ever miss it?" Sarah asked suddenly. "Your old life, running Anderson Enterprises, the power, the influence." Michael considered the question honestly. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it," he admitted. "Problems that could be solved with strategy and resources, clear objectives, measurable outcomes." And now? He looked at her, This woman who had been stranger, lover, mystery, and finally partner through the most extraordinary chapter of his life. Now I have something I never really had before, a family. A purpose beyond the next acquisition or merger. Sarah leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder. Emma asked me today if we'll stay here forever. What did you tell her? That forever is a very long time, but that we'll stay as long as it makes us happy and keeps us safe. Sarah paused. She seemed satisfied with that. Smart girl, Michael observed. Takes after her mother. And her father, Sarah added. She has your determination, your moral compass. The compliment warmed him. After everything they'd been through, the deceptions, the revelations, the painful truths, they had found their way to a genuine partnership built on something deeper than the passion of their first relationship or the necessary alliance of their recent struggles. What about Lucas? Michael asked, voicing the concern that never fully left either of them. When he's older, when his differences become more pronounced. We'll face that together, Sarah replied simply. With honesty, with support, with all the love and protection we can provide, not as an experiment or a project, but as our son. As they stood together in the peaceful night, Michael reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them here, from a corporate office, where a small girl had appeared with a letter, to this quiet beach halfway around the world. The challenges ahead remained significant. Lucas's development would bring questions, possibly complications. Emma's memories of trauma would need continuing care and attention. Their own relationship, rebuilt from ruins, required ongoing nurturing. Yet for the first time, since Emma had walked into his office with her baby brother strapped to her back, Michael felt something approaching peace. Not the false security of wealth or power, but the quieter certainty of being exactly where he was meant to be, with the people who mattered most. The letter that had started everything, Sarah's desperate plea entrusting their children to him, had set in motion events neither of them could have predicted. But standing here now, Michael wouldn't have changed a single word.